In order to understand the defense system, I will speak of an analogy and I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. So I said we have two major immunities. We have the one that you're born with, and then we also have the one that you acquire from the time that you are born. If we get an analogy of this, we could view it this way. So from the first line of defense, okay, so we have the first line of defense, and in this line we have two components, all right, and then we have the second one. So in the first one, uh, imagine you have a security company, and this security company um, is involved the guards, yes, they simply keep things out. So if you get guards to stand by the gate, um, they simply make sure that bad things stay out. All right, and what would make out for this in the body would be things such as the skin as well as the membrane. Okay? Alright, so that is their main job. They are there to ensure that things are kept out and they stay out. And we'll talk about what it is about the skin and what it is about the membrane that makes it possible for them to do that. All right? So, another innate or very non specific um, way of dealing with pathogens is a second one where we could make an analogy of the police. So in the police, the department, they try to deal with those that break the first breach. Okay, so they come in. Let's say they have a way of making sure that they get past the guards and they come into your yard or your home. And when they breach or when they do this, when they go past this first initial line of defense, you find that then the police will come in. What you will do is you will call the police and say something has come in. So for this one, it's they breach, okay? So they come in, and when they come in, when you call the police will deal with them in such a way that it is a very non-specific approach. So it doesn't matter um, what type of bad guy has come into the place. As long as they're bad guys. They'll be handled, and they will be, so to speak, neutralized. And by neutralized, I don't mean kill, of course. By neutralized, I mean they'll be taken to the to the jail or to the police station, and so on and so forth. So for these ones, the non-specific attacks or non-specific resistance, we will learn about what how this can go on when you have microbes or pathogens coming into the body. So we'll learn about the inflammatory responses. We'll learn about so inflammation as well as NKC. We'll learn about the phagocytic cells and how they respond, and also antimicrobial uh, proteins. All right. Then we have the third one. So the third one is the one that is known as the acquired. Now, in the acquired, the analogy of this could be intelligence. So you've seen on TV, we have every government having this wing of intelligence, and their role is to send out, all right, they send out individuals who learn about the enemies, so that these enemies, once they learn about them, they have a strategic, okay, a strategic way of dealing with very specific enemies. All right, so these do not just get to anything that has come in. They've got very specific, very targeted, very learned about ways of dealing with these microbes or with these pathogens. And in order to learn about these, we use humoral responses as well as cell mediated. So in humoral responses, this is when there's an they've gone into the blood, of course, and then infection of the cell will be cell-mediated responses. So having done this, we will now start with the first component, right? And in this component, we'll learn about what is happening with the skin and the membrane. So we'll learn about this area. Okay. So when we talk about skin and the mucoid components, we see that the main goal is to keep things away. And they keep things away because they act as a barrier. Okay? And also, we have some secretions that help to keep these things away. For example, when we talk about the skin, we're talking about the fact that it is oily, it is also acidic. So these two factors help keep these invaders away. And if you could also look at acidic in terms of the GIT, in that the stomach area, okay, being acidic, can be viewed as the outside of the body, so that things can't go into the body. That would be a very good way of looking at the barrier. Aside that, we can also look at the second component now, which just deals with non-specific invaders. Okay, so generally, how does this happen? So we have several components, we have several types of cells that deal with these, and these cells include cells such as, let me just put line there, so cells such as the neutrophils, which we learned about, the macrophages, as well as the dendritic cells. So these were just from learning about how they come about. So when we talk about the neutrophils move around the bloodstream and quickly get to the site of infection. So if there's an infection, if there's an intrusion, the neutrophils will go there and they will phagocytosize. They will take in over 20 pathogens, and they collect them and then form pus. Okay, the macrophages are not as mobile, and they can take more pathogens, about 100, before they die. Whilst the dendritic cells, these are phagocytes that are found on the surface of the body that are in contact with the external environment. So you see that phagocytosis and antigen presentation in this case can take place. So we have phagocytosis plus antigen presentation. Okay, so another cell that is involved in the innate immunity system is the NKC, or the natural killer cell. So how does it really work? So the natural killer cell works by destroying other human cells that are not healthy anymore. Okay, so it works by destruction of other cells, destruction of human cells. So how does it know which ones to destroy? We see that healthy cells have what is known as a major histocompatibility complex. This is MHC1, and this is presented on their membrane. So each of the cells will move around with that particular protein that is complex that is expressed on their cells. So MHC1 is not presented, or it breaks down when the cell is infected, especially with viruses. Okay, so once this is not there anymore, or once this is not presented anymore, what will happen is the NKC will then identify that it is not present, and then it will inject some proteolytic enzymes into the infected cell. So how does this happen? So when you have a normal cell, you have the MHC1 being presented there, you have the NKC cell coming, and this NKC has what I can call an inhibiting receptor, okay, a receptor that can sense the MHC1, okay. It also has another component, all right. This component is known as the activating receptor. So the activating receptor is the one that is able to hold on to another part of the cell that is known as a ubiquitous hormone or molecule, I beg your pardon. So these two are in sync and never let go, so to speak, or they can always identify each other. But in a case where you have this MHC1 no longer there, then you have an opening between these two. So once you have an opening between the activating receptor and the ubiquitous molecule, that is when you have the proteolytic enzymes that are in the NKC moving into the infected cell. And once it moves into the infected cell, these proteolytic enzymes break down the cell, and then you have cell death. So basically that's how the NKC cell works. Before we go on, we should note that white blood cells from the capillaries have the ability to move to sites of infection. And then when they're there, they're able to release chemicals. And these chemicals allow the capillaries to even open up more, especially between the endothelial cells, and aid with the movement of cells from the vessels to the area of infection in a process known as diapedesis. So we see that in mechanisms of inflammation, this particular mechanism is used very much. So First of all, you have the tissues themselves. So I think let us just start on a clear plate and just say the tissue have the macrophages. Okay, they also have dendritic cells and they have mast cells. And then the blood capillaries, they have phagocytes as well as red blood cells and other white blood cells. So the main players that we will talk about in inflammation are the mast cells. So the mast cells act as whistleblowers. So here's how inflammation takes place. We'll start with the mast cells. So with the mast cells, we see that they are, as we explained earlier, they are heavily granulated cells and found in connective tissue as well. So when they come into contact with the external environment because there has been a breach, their granules, which have proteoglycans, histamine, and many other proteases, are activated, or they, in the next